Hey, so on the subject of showering on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So before we get into the issue of showering on Yom Tov, just an introduction and understanding what we call Gzeiras Chachamim and especially Minhagim. And this is especially true of Shabbos. There are different types of decrees that are enacted by our sages. There are some which are enacted around preventing greater prohibition, and that's the center, the core of that enactment. And therefore, there are circumstances when an enactment, that prohibition is not in, we're not in fear of violating the prohibition, the enactment falls away, the Gzeira falls away. There is such a gather. Then there is certain times when the Gzeira itself is not so much about preventing the prohibition, but because they understand this is a problem to begin with. And therefore they say it's forbidden. They may hang their hat, so to speak, of that prohibition on preventing a maybe of a maybe, but in essence, it's not because of the maybe. It's because the etzim, it's also. It's in essentially something that the Chachamim, the sages understand is wrong, not simply because it might lead to something else. Classic example is muktzah. Muktzah, which means not to touch something on Shabbos you don't need. That's the overarching principle of muktzah. There's a bunch of categories, just exactly what considers a need and not a need. But that's the overarching rule. Don't touch, don't move something. I'm sorry, not touch. Don't move something you don't need on Shabbos. That's the overarching principle of muktzah. The Gemara has a whole dance about the history of muktzah. That initially it was because they're worried people were going to carry on Shabbos out of their houses. They're walking around in their house holding things they don't need. They're going to walk out. And the end was, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, he also goes to the dance. And the bottom line is, as the Rambam formulates it also, the Alter Rebbe quotes that, is Shabbos is about resting. Biblically speaking, what's rest? Don't do creative work. So a person can spend his whole day doing what we in English call work and never violate the biblical creative work and say, I never violated Shabbos. But did he have a Shabbos? He didn't have a Shabbos. He's working out all day. He's lifting weights. He was moving furniture around the house. Didn't do any creative work. I didn't do any malacha, but didn't have a Shabbos. So the sages came and said, okay, if you don't need it, don't touch it. Because Shabbos, you're meant to sit put. So it's the kind of Gzeira which didn't really come because of, initially it started out, you might end up doing something else. But it's not really the might do something else. It's inherently a problem. So when it comes to showering on Shabbos, as we're going to see, it's a Gzeira, which is a decree, an enactment from the sages, not a biblical issue. But it would seem to me that also a very similar dance is happening here. And the end is going to be, I think, that Jews have taken upon themselves that this is not a Shabbos behavior, even if you can find ways to do it properly. And I'll demonstrate exactly how that is. So let's go to the actual decree, the enactment. What's the reason for it? And therefore, what are the parameters? So the enactment is like this. A person should not wash his full body or the majority of his body from using hot water that was heated before Shabbos. If it's heated on Shabbos, certainly you can't, because you're not allowed to heat water on Shabbos. And anything that was done in violation of Shabbos, one may not enjoy on Shabbos. So certainly if it was heated on Shabbos, out the question. But even if it was heated before Shabbos, you should not shower the majority of your body, at least, on Shabbos. Why? Because the people running the bathhouses want to have the good clientele, good customer, happy customer. So they're going to stoke the flames on Shabbos for you. Or they'll put it in just before Shabbos, but it's also problematic, like without the blech, like we have at a child pot. And they're going to tell you, the customer, yeah, I did everything kosher and good. Oh, don't worry about it. You can shower. You can take your shower. And that's the reason for the enactment. Does it apply in your house? No one's eating anything in your house. Assuming that in your house, no water is being reheated when you turn your shower. Let's say you go down to the boiler and you turn it off. So all the hot water that's there, that's it. Or you're showering from your hot water urn. So there's no cooking involved. Just using preheated water, right? Just like your coffee. Does that apply there? No. And yet the Gzeira still stands. The enactment still stands. No washing your majority of your body with hot water. Which means then, on this level, that if you went to Tveria and you went to the hot springs, there's no actual heat that's heated up that water. So it's way too disconnected from the maybe someone's going to reheat it because it's already boiling hot. From this standard, you could. bathe in there. And likewise, you can bathe in cold water. But nonetheless, says the Alter Rebbe, even though it's not mentioned in the Ramah, not mentioned by the Ramah, certainly not mentioned by the Shulchan Aruch, it's mentioned by the Beis Yosef and the Mariel mentions it. I can't remember if the Kaf Chaim also, because I don't remember. Anyway, the custom minhag is Jews have taken it upon themselves not to shower at all on Shabbos, even in cold water. Why? There's a bunch of different issues around bathing on Shabbos. A person bathes in the river and he doesn't dry himself properly, he's carrying water. A person, if he's in the river, he may, if it's not an enclosure and he's swimming, it causes another problem, maybe. And a person might squeeze out his hair, even though squeezing out hair on Shabbos itself not biblical, it's only a rabbinic issue because hair doesn't absorb water, but that also is an issue. It says the Alter Rebbe, because people aren't aware of all these details, therefore Jews have taken it upon themselves, we're not showering on Shabbos, even in cold water, even though technically speaking one may. And this takes me back to my original point. I mean, in the privacy of your own home, a cold shower, no one's wringing out their, squeezing out their, twisting their beard to squeeze it out, right? At least. And yet, Jews have decided this is not the Shabbos behavior. So I think it's a very similar dance here. So in other words, originally by law, there's technical reasons for the prohibition. Maybe the guy's going to reheat the shower for you. And therefore the prohibition technically is limited to situations where there might be an issue. But nonetheless, Jews have taken it upon themselves to say this is not the way we behave on Shabbos. Because we're worried you're going to carry the water when you walk out of the river, we're worried you're going to squeeze your hair out, all kinds of reasons that, to quote the Alter Rebbe, people don't know these laws and therefore they decided they're going to cancel the whole shower to begin with. Which to me means Jews understood this is not the way you observe Shabbos. Now, if this is their thinking, which I think is correct, someone asked me recently about going to a pool on Shabbos. It's a cold pool, no issue of being reheated. It's an enclosure, no issue of carrying. No one has any long hair or beards, so there's no issue of squeezing out any hair. Should we? So my answer would be, look, technically speaking, you're not violating any law. But if you read the subtext of the chapter in Shulchan Aruch, you understand this is not the way a Jew behaves on Shabbos. It's the same issue as muktzah. The sages looked around and said, is anything wrong with carrying furniture? We can't find any prohibition not to carry furniture on Shabbos. But if you do that, you're not having a Shabbos. So we're canceling it. That's what muktzah is. And I think the similar thing happened with the showering and bathing on Shabbos, but not from the Chachamim, from the Jews, from Jewish people. So I mentioned, it's not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. The Mariel mentions it, and other sources mention it. The Rabbi mentions it, that because there's so many issues, Jews decided this is not a Shabbos behavior, we're not doing any showers on Shabbos. So that is with regard to Shabbos and showering. Hope it brought more clarity than confusion, but this is what I think is the right approach. Now, as far as soaps go, sorry? Okay, so when it comes to mikveh, it's the Alter Rebbe writes like this, that, so a person's allowed to go to mikveh if he's going from an impure state to a state of purity. Even if the impure to the pure is even tangential, say a woman, it's actually the other way around. There are those who make the case that a woman should not go to mikveh on Shabbos because it's misakin, which means you're not allowed to do the last thing necessary for a component to work. You're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. So this woman could not be with her husband. Now she goes to mikveh. Now she could be with her husband. So we're like, misakin. We're fixing the scenario. But nonetheless, says the Alter Rebbe, that's not an issue. You can go to the mikveh on Shabbos. And why? Oh, again, it's this tangential thing, but it comes from the thinking. He says because it doesn't necessarily look as if she's doing this for tikkun, because people go to the bath to cool off anyway. So to the observer, it doesn't look like she's doing a tikkun, even if it's in the dead of winter and you're going to break the ice. Who's going to refresh themselves in the breaking of the ice in the winter? But nonetheless, in theory, someone's going to bathe themselves, and we can go to mikveh. In other words, it comes back to the same thing. What's a Shabbosdik thing? Jews understand showering is not Shabbosdik, we're canceling it. Going to mikveh is good, go to mikveh. So a person needs to go to mikveh for additional kedusha, by all means, go. He puts in the parentheses actually even that someone who's going to mikvah for tshuva, not just because he is tumas keri, tum of the bris. He is not suffering from that issue. Just for teshuva, he wants to go to mikvah. A mumar wants to go to tshuva. He can also go to mikvah on Shabbos. It's about understanding what's a Shabbos-like thing to do. But I did see at least one source, actually two interesting to say about that. The first thing is, it's not at least one source which says not to linger in the mikvah. And now you've turned it into a personal bath and you've gone to the previous issue. That is in the water itself. Number two, the beard, especially those who are rolling their beards, should know the following. There's a Yid, his name is Rabbi Winner, who wrote a book called on the halachas of growing a beard at the Rebbe's instruction. So he put a booklet, which I tried finding, I couldn't, but I read it not very long ago, circulating, in which he made the case that better go to mikveh and not unroll your beard than unroll your beard and roll it back up. It's a very simple, practical reason. Because in the unrolling and rolling back up, you're likely to pull out a hair. And then maybe you're going to squeeze your hair out, which is the maybe issue of the water here, which you're probably not doing anyway, is nowhere near the issue, the almost absolute fact that you're going to pull out a hair when you unroll your beard. It's better go to mikveh without unrolling. And but when you dry, just make sure you're not doing any extra wringing out of your beard. So that's two things to mention. I don't want to mention the mikveh, so thank you for reminding me about mikveh. Okay, with respect to soap, we're going to get to Yom Tov in a minute. Okay. So everything I said till now, by the way, is all if the water is already preheated on Shabbos and you're doing no cooking. But today, when you turn the shower on, you're doing cooking. So everything I said till now, first of all, we always said the minhag is not to shower even in cold. But even if you're going to avoid the minhag and say, I'm going to go to dry halacha, in your house, you can't do this because in your house, you're cooking the water as it goes into the boiler. Or if you have, sorry? Right, but then you come to the minhag issue. The custom that Jews have accepted not to shower on Shabbos. Yeah. Okay, when it comes to Yom Tov, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so first on soap, just two comments on soap. It's really actually one comment, but the issue of using soap on Shabbos, which is a bar of soap, the Alter Rebbe writes that the issue is what's called noilad, which means to take one substance and make it into a new substance, give birth to a new substance. So if you take a bar of soap and you run it in water and you wash your hands, you take in a solid and turn it into a liquid. That's a problem. Now, because the Alter Rebbe says that, rather than saying the problem with using soap is smoothing out the surface or smoothing it out in your hands, it does not say that's the issue. And the Chaim Noah, the famous Lubavitcher Rov in Yerushalayim, makes the case at great length that there's no issue of smoothing out the soap on Shabbos, for whatever reason. The only issue is no issue of smoothing out the soap. There is a prohibition in the machik, which is to smooth out a surface. Like, for example, just inside, making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a design and you're smoothing out in a certain way is a problem. If you're doing it simply because you want to cover the surface, is permissible. If you do it in such a way that you're doing it with intention of the design of the peanut butter on the bread, you run into the issue of the machik. So that issue does not apply to soap, as Rabbi Chaim Noah makes the case at great length. So considering that, so the issue is only when it comes to a bar of soap, but you're taking a solid and turning it into a liquid. That is what the Alter Rebbe says. So based on this, Rabbi Auerbach rules that one may use liquid soap on Shabbos, even if it produces foam and bubbles. And he goes through explanation why, based on Rabbi Noah's reading of the Alter Rebbe. There are those who are machmir on the liquid soap, but this is a very reliable source to be able to use hand soap on Shabbos. That's liquid to begin with. I'm not going to answer the question. That's a very good question. Because he talks about the fact that you don't care for the foam and you got the foam not be there. So maybe I'm going to get back to you. It's a good question. Now, when it comes to children, bathing children on Shabbos, the Alter Rebbe writes in Hilchos Yom Kippur, actually, making reference to Hilchos Shabbos, that whatever it is that an adult is not allowed to do, one may not do to their children directly. So you can't feed your children not kosher, even though they're not obligated and not kosher. And this applies universally to all Jewish practices that we don't do. We do not physically give that to our children. So bathing your children on Shabbos is the same thing as bathing an adult, even if it's in cold water and so on. Considering the custom that we have to cancel all bathing on Shabbos. So when it comes to Yom Tov, it's like this. And Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. Now, the prohibition to bathe your whole body, to wash your whole body, the way we establish it, even on Shabbos, is already rabbinic. Right? Well, let's take a more. You have to cook on Yom Tov. But you're only allowed to cook on Yom Tov for something that counts as a need. Yeah? Even if it's a tangential need, but it has to be a need. It's called Shavuot L'chol Nefesh. Now, our sages ruled that showering your whole body is not a need that every person needs. Notwithstanding the fact that nowadays everybody showers every day. The way the sages understood it, a person doesn't shower every day, and it doesn't count as a need. And therefore, boiling water, cooking water on Yom Tov, for the sake of bathing your whole body or washing your whole body is prohibited. Hands, feet, or one body part at a time. Literally, the language in Shulchan Aruch is Yadav, Panav, Raglav, hand, feet, and face, which is the kind of thing people wash all the time, that you may heat up water to wash on Yom Tov. Now, the machlekes is like this. There's a dispute if this prohibition to heat water to wash your entire body on Yom Tov, right, means you're actually cooking water, which you're allowed to do on Yom Tov. You're not starting a fire, you're cooking water. You're cooking it to wash your whole body. Is that prohibition biblical or rabbinic? What's the difference? The difference is, well, if the water was heated before Yom Tov, where we just learned about Shabbos, it's not a biblical prohibition to wash from the water that was heated before Yom Tov. It's rabbinic/custom. Now, if heating water on, and what was the problem with the water that was preheated before Shabbos? Why you shouldn't use it on Shabbos? Because maybe the guy's going to reheat it for you now. Right? When it comes to Yom Tov, reheating it for you now itself might not be such a big problem. So if the reheating it for you, if heating water for yourself to have a full bath on Yom Tov is itself rabbinic, then using that preheated water, the water that was heated before Yom Tov, is like a rabbinic enactment to prevent from a rabbinic enactment. It's called l'gzeda. So if heating water for yourself on Yom Tov to have a full bath is only rabbinic, then it would be completely permissible to use water that was cooked erev Yom Tov to wash, be completely permissible, which is indeed what the Shulchan Aruch writes. The Machaber, the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Kaira writes, you may on Yom Tov bathe on preheated water, full body. But Rama says no, Alter Rebbe says no, and sorry, Alter Rebbe actually says that the Ikir is like the people who say yes, but the custom is no. And the Kaf HaChaim also writes, Kaf HaChaim, which is a more recent Sephardic halachic ruler, cites the Alter Rebbe and says the Sephardim also should not bathe their full body on Yom Tov, even if the water was preheated before Shabbos. What you may do is not what he says. You should not do that. Sorry, on Yom Tov, from Yom Tov. Sorry, yes, Yom Tov. Shabbos, we already covered this. Yom Tov. What you may do, however, says the Alter Rebbe, you can wash limb by limb in hot water. Why is that? Because even in the opinion which says you may not wash your entire body using preheated water from before Shabbos, allows for washing hands, feet, and mouth, hands, feet, and face, even if the water was heated on Yom Tov. So which means every time I wash that one individual limb in the shower that was heated before Yom Tov, at that moment it was permissible. And then when I retreat that limb and I put the other limb in, it was also permissible. Then I put the next limb in, it was also permissible. So I cannot isolate any act as a prohibition. Even though when it comes to Shabbos, if we're to go by law, not by the custom we banned all showers. But if we're to go by law that you're allowed to use preheated water to wash part of your body, not the majority. That prohibition stands even if you did limb by limb. You cannot go past the majority of your body, even if you were to go by law on Shabbos. When it comes to Yom Tov, says the Alter Rebbe, that you could do limb by limb, washing your body on Yom Tov, even though at the end, it comes out that your entire body is washed, and presumably because the Alter Rebbe himself said he leans towards being lenient to begin with, but everybody's, I don't have that here, but everybody's, the custom is to be stringent and not to wash your full body on Yom Tov. So I'm saying also, if you do limb by limb, because each individual act was never a prohibition, it's fine. Now, the question becomes, our showers. Is our boiler considered preheated before Yom Tov? And if it's preheated before Yom Tov, then limb by limb, you can use that water to wash your hand, to wash your body. Or is it considered cooking on Yom Tov? And cooking on Yom Tov, if you're already established, you may not cook water to wash your entire body. Whether it's biblical or rabbinic, you still may not boil water for the sake of washing your entire body. So here we get an interesting split between Shabbos and Yom Tov. When it comes to Shabbos, where cooking is inherently a problem, biblical prohibition, it's one of the 39 works. So when I shower on Yom Tov, on Shabbos, or I turn on the hot water, and new water comes into the boiler, I'm cooking new water. So it's irrelevant if the water I'm using was preheated before Shabbos or on Shabbos, it makes a difference. Even if the water I'm using is preheated before Shabbos, I'm still cooking now. When it comes to Yom Tov, it's a different story. The water I'm taking out of the boiler was cooked before Yom Tov. It's new water that's coming in that's now cooking on Yom Tov. Right? Is that a problem? What's that water for? For everything else in the house. And everything else in the house, I'm allowed to do. I'm allowed to cook on. I'm allowed to use hot water to cook anything. Moreover, it happens automatically without me asking for it. So here's where you get a split between Shabbos and Yom Tov. When you turn on the shower on Shabbos, the refilling of the water is considered cooking on Shabbos. On Yom Tov, the water you're using for the shower is considered cooked before Yom Tov, and therefore you can wash limb by limb. But the new water that's coming in, even if it's cooked on Yom Tov, it's not being cooked for your shower. It's being cooked for your house, which to begin with is allowed, especially since it's happening automatically. That's Rabbi Gabriel rules that way, and so does Rabbi Auerbach. What do you want to say? Yeah. It doesn't matter. The Torah Gabriel writes, the problem is making a special cooking for your shower. There's no special cooking for your shower happening. There's cooking for water in your house. And there happens to be plenty for your shower also. But nobody poured water in, okay, now we're going to heat it up for your shower. And that's the essence of the prohibition here, considering the whole thing is at least partially rabbinic to begin with. Right? Okay, so, yeah?
Can you use the same rationale from Yom Tov saying that even if you're washing it limb by limb, be allowed, it's not Yom Tov?
That's a funny thing. It's an interesting, it's a good question. So when it comes to Shabbos, he's out there writes, custom is everybody accepted upon themselves, no showering on Shabbos, even cold water. When it comes to Yom Tov, he puts in parentheses this loophole of doing limb by limb. He himself offers that. So we must, there are those who are machmir because of another issue, which is, even on Yom Tov, when you're allowed to shower, without to have cooked water, you may not shower at a shower house because you might come to wash your entire body at once. So someone apply that to your shower also. It's right there. You might shower your whole body. So I saw someone suggest keep partially clothes on while you're showering. I don't know if you have to do that, but it's interesting. It's a good point. When it comes to Shabbos, Jews take it that no, even for cold water. When it comes to Yom Tov, the Alter was offering you a loophole to do limb by limb. So it seems, I don't know, why would this be not Yom Tov? I don't know. But I will say though, and again, this is my feeling, it's not written anywhere. But that logic I would apply to going to the pool. It's a 2-day Yom Tov or a 3-day Yom Tov, especially in our society where people shower every day, taking, not a lingering shower, cleaning yourself up because you want to come to shul fresh. So not Yom Tov, especially since anyways you're cooking in your house with water boiling. But sitting at the pool, even though technically speaking it's less prohibited because it's cold, and it's no issue whatsoever from a technical point of view, your shower limb by limb is more technically problematic than the pool, I would still be quicker to say it's okay to shower limb by limb than it is to go to the pool on Yom Tov. Using the logic that you just presented, that it's not Yom Tov, it's not a Yom Tov, it's not a way of spending your Yom Tov. Even though, like I said, it's not. I actually, it's written in certain places that going to a pool is not Yom Tov, but not from a halakhic perspective, from an understanding of what Yom Tov is supposed to be. It's supposed to belong by a pool on Yom Tov. Anyway, so I hope that gives some clarity. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for joining us. It was wonderful Kinus Torah. And now, ready for mine already, right?